Hi everyone, welcome to Story Time. My name is Miss Smith and today we get to read a story together that's called Two of Everything. Can you read that? Two of Everything. This is a story about an old married couple named Mr. and Mrs. Hawktalk who find a magical brass pot in their garden. And it shows what happens to them when they find that magical pot. Before we read it, I wanted to show you something about the number 2. Can you say it? The number 2. The number 2 is a number that I like a little bit better than the number 1 because you might remember when I showed you the 1 dot pattern that I told you, I always feel sorry for the number 1 because it looks like such a sad, lonely number. But when I make the number 2, now the number 1 is going to have a partner. It's going to have a friend. How I make the 2 pattern is I take my dot from the middle of the board and I move it to the corner. Then I take my second dot and I put it in the other corner. And now I've made a 2 pattern. Can you say it? Now I've made a 2 pattern. You got it. And I count it like this. 1, 2. Can you do it? Ready? 1, 2. Super easy. When I have 2 of something, it makes a pair. That's kind of fun to say. When I have 2 of something, it makes a pair. You got it. So let's read 2 of Everything and find out what happens to Mr. and Mrs. Hawktalk when they find a magical brass pot. Once, long ago, in a humble little hut, that means a little house, lived Mr. Hawktalk and his wife, Mrs. Hawktalk. I wonder, could you say Mr. Hawktalk, Mrs. Hawktalk? Ready? Mr. Hawktalk, Mrs. Hawktalk. Good, those are their names. They were old and very poor. What little they ate came from their tiny garden. So they do have a garden where they grow food, but they just don't grow very much food. In a lucky year, when the harvest was plentiful, that means when they did grow a lot of food that year, Mr. Hawktalk had a little extra to take to the village. There he traded turnips, potatoes, and other vegetables for clothing, lamp oil, and fresh seeds. So he traded some of what they grew in their garden for other things that they would need throughout the year. One spring morning when Mr. Hawktalk was digging in his garden, his shovel struck something hard. Puzzled, he dug deeper into the dark ground until he came upon an ancient pot made of brass. And brass is a very shiny, bright metal, kind of like gold. How odd, said Mr. Hawktalk to himself, to think that I have been digging here all these years and never came upon this pot before. I will take it home. Maybe Mrs. Hawktalk can find some use for it. So he says, I don't know what we could do with it, but maybe my wife will know. The pot was big and heavy for old Mr. Hawktalk. As he stumbled along, his purse, which contained his last 5 gold coins, fell to the ground. So his purse just means the bag where he keeps his money. He tossed it into the pot for safekeeping and staggered home. So he says, I can't carry my purse and the pot. I'll just throw the purse into the pot. His wife greeted him at the door. Dear husband, what a strange pot. I wonder if you could do it like her, like you're so surprised and say, what a strange pot. Ready? What a strange pot. Good. Mr. Hawktalk explained how he found the pot. I wonder what we can do with it, said Mrs. Hawktalk. It looks too large to cook in and too small to bathe in. So she's not really sure what they should do with it either. As Mrs. Hawktalk leaned over to peer into the pot, her hairpin, that means a barrette that she wears in her hairpin, the only one she owned, fell in. She felt around in the pot and suddenly her eyes grew round with surprise. Can you make your eyes round like you're surprised? Ready? Good. Look, she shouted, I've pulled out 2 hairpins, exactly alike, and 2 purses too. Sure enough, the purses were identical, and so were the hairpins. Inside each purse were 5 gold coins. So the pot didn't just give them 2 purses, it also gave them what was inside the purses, the gold coins. Oh, this is exciting. Mr. Hawk Talk was so excited he jumped up and down. Let's put my winter coat inside the pot. If we are lucky again, the pot will make 2 coats and then we will both stay warm. So into the pot went 1 coat and out came 2 coats. They began to search the house and quickly put more things into the magical pot. If only we had some meat, wished Mr. Hawk Talk, or fresh fruit, or 1 delicious sweet cake. Because of course, if you had 1 delicious sweet cake and you put it into the pot, out would come 2 delicious sweet cakes. It doubles everything you have. Mrs. Hawk Talk smiled. I know how we can get anything we want, she said. She put their 10 coins into 1 purse, then threw it into the pot. She pulled out 2 purses with 10 coins in each. What a clever wife I have, cried Mr. Hawk Talk. Each time we do this, we will have twice as much money as before. The Hawk Talks worked late into the night, filling and emptying the pot until the floor was covered with coins. And look, while they're sleeping, the coins are just covering the floor around them. Wow. Imagine having a pot that doubled your coins. Morning came and off went Mr. Hawk Talk with a long list of things to buy in the village. Instead of vegetables, his basket was full of gold coins. Mrs. Hawk Talk finished all of her chores and sat down to enjoy a cup of tea. She sipped her tea and admired the brass pot. That means she just looked at it like she appreciated it so much. Can you pretend you're looking at it like you appreciate it so much? Ready? Oh, good. She's admiring it. Then, with a grateful heart, she knelt and embraced it. Dear pot, I do not know where you came from, but you are my best friend. She stooped over the pot to look inside. Uh-oh, that makes me nervous, like something's going to happen. She stooped over the pot to look inside. At that very moment, Mr. Hawk Talk returned. His arms were so full of packages that he had to kick the door open. Bang! Mrs. Hawk Talk was so startled that she lost her balance and fell head first into the pot. Uh-oh. Can you say it? Ready? Uh-oh. I think we know what's going to happen. Mr. Hawk Talk ran over and grabbed his wife's legs. He pulled and tugged until she slid out onto the floor. But when he looked at the pot again, he gasped. Can you do that? Ready? He gasped. 2 more legs were sticking straight out of it. Naturally, he took hold of the ankles and pulled. Out came a second person. She looked exactly like his wife. Oh dear. Now he's going to have 2 Mrs. Hawk Talks. The new Mrs. Hawk Talk sat silently on the floor, looking lost. She's thinking, uh-oh, what just happened to me? She doesn't know about how the pot works, so she's sitting there confused and lost, like, can you do that? Ready? Good. But the first Mrs. Hawk Talk cried, I am your one and only wife. Put that woman back into the pot right now. Uh-oh. Do you think he should put her back into the pot? Show me thumbs up or thumbs down. Should he do it? Uh-oh. A lot of kids say thumbs down because then it will make another Mrs. Hawk Talk. Good. Put that woman back into the pot right now. Mr. Hawk Talk yelled, No! If I put her back, we will not have 2 women, but 3. 1 wife is enough for me. I wonder, could you say that like him? 1 wife is enough for me. Ready? 1 wife is enough for me. Good. He backed away from his angry wife and tripped and fell head first into the pot himself. Uh-oh, I think I know what's going to happen. Both Mrs. Hawk Talks rushed to rescue him. Each grasped an ankle, and together they pulled him out. Ooh, I wonder, could you do that like you're pulling and say, they pulled him out? Ready? They pulled him out. Good. There were 2 more legs in the pot, so they pulled out the other Mr. Hawk Talk too. Because of course they can't just leave him in there. Just what use does one Mr. Hawk Talk have for another? Mr. Hawk Talk cried angrily. This pot is not as wonderful as we thought it to be. Now even our troubles are beginning to double. He means at first it was giving us 2 of everything good, but now it's even doubling our troubles. We have 2 troubles. I wonder if you could say it like him and say, now even our troubles are beginning to double. Ready? Now even our troubles are beginning to double. Good. But his wife had been thinking while he was yelling. Calm down, she said. It is good that the other Mrs. Hawk Talk has her own Mr. Hawk Talk. Perhaps we will become best of friends. After all, we are so alike. He will be a brother to you, and she a sister to me. With our pot, we can make 2 of everything, so there will be plenty to go around. She said, we don't have to worry about having enough food or clothing because, of course, we can just double everything we have. And that is what they did. The Hawk Talks built 2 fine new homes. Each house had identical teapots, rice bowls, silk embroideries, and bamboo furniture. From the outside, the houses looked exactly alike. But there was one difference. Hidden in one house was a big brass pot. Of course, the Hawk Talks were always very careful not to fall into it again. Because they say, now we have best friends, but we don't need another set. The new Hawk Talks and the old Hawk Talks did become good friends. The neighbors thought that the Hawk Talks had grown so rich that they decided to have 2 of everything, even themselves. Which is true, they did decide to have 2 of everything. I wonder if you could have 2 of yourself, would you want to do it? Show me thumbs up or thumbs down. Would you want 2 of yourself if you could have 2 of yourself? Some kids say, yeah, that might be fun. Other kids say, no, 1 of me is enough. Okay, good listening today. Before we put our story away, I wonder, do you still remember how to count the 2 pattern? Will you just do it in the air while I point to it on the board? Ready? 1, 2. Super easy. Good listening today. Okay, see you next time. Bye.